The debate over transparency in Nigeria's electoral process is heating up again as citizens, civil society groups and legal experts renew calls for the mandatory electronic transmission of election results. With the 2027 elections on the horizon, many argue this reform is critical to restoring public trust in our democracy.
On the other hand, skeptics point to infrastructure gaps such as poor internet connectivity, unreliable power supply and legal ambiguities as reasons why Nigeria may not yet be ready. Today we will be taking a deep look into this issue with someone who knows the system inside out. Joining us for this discussion is the former National Commissioner of INEC, Festus Okoye. Good morning and thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
All right. Mr. Okoye, Nigerians say the 2023 elections exposed fundamental weaknesses in results collation, particularly because of the lack of real-time transmission, which they have advocated for in this current cycle. Do you, first of all, agree that mandatory electronic transmission is the only way to rebuild trust in Nigeria's electoral process? Or maybe we should ask if you agree that the 2023 election was marred as a result of the failure of real-time collation.
Well, with the benefit of hindsight and on deeper reflection, I believe that every electoral management body must pay attention to public opinion, but ultimately rely on the constitutional and legal framework for the conduct of election in relation to what it does. Having said that, let me put it this way, that from beginning, it is very clear, and it was very clear to everybody, that there was some level of misinterpretation, misalignment, and misinformation relating to the provisions of the law. Right from beginning, from EC8A had always been and had remained the primary source of collation of results. Now, even before the conduct of the 2023 general election, the Supreme Court had interpreted the provisions of the law relating to what Nigerians called electronic transmission of results. And the Supreme Court had made it very clear in the case of Oyetola that the INEC result viewing portal was not a collation portal, that it was established purposely and mainly for purposes of giving Nigerians a sense of what is going on at the polling unit or what goes on at the polling unit, and just for public accountability and not part of the collation system. And so to that particular extent, so many Nigerians misinterpreted the establishment of the IReV portal as a collation process and as a collation system. But the Supreme Court made it very clear that the IReV portal was not established as a collation system, and that results from the IReV do not go to the collation process, they go to a different process. If you recall, before the 2023 general election, the Independent National Electoral Commission established several portals. One established what we call the Candidates Nomination Portal, through which political parties transmit or forward the list of their duly nominated candidates to the Electoral Management Body. The Commission also established an observer portal for domestic and international election observers to apply for purposes of election observation. It also established a portal for political parties to upload the list and particulars of their polling agents, and also establish a portal for the media to apply for accreditation. So the IReV portal was one of those portals, but it did not, is not part of the collation process and was never meant to be a part of the collation process. But so much happened during that particular period, and most Nigerians believe that the IReV portal and the results from the IReV portal are used for purposes of collation. But in truth and in fact, and in law, it was not meant to be so.
So, I mean, what we're saying here, we just want to get it clear, because
Yes.
you were part and parcel of the entire build-up planning to the 2023 elections, which inadvertently transformed and reimagined, as it were, the way Nigerians see elections and the electoral system today. So we want to get it clearly. One, are you saying, Barrister Okoye, that the immediate transmission of results on the IReV portal was never in the plan during the entire planning for 2023. We just want to get that out of the way.
No. The commission clearly established the INEC result viewing portal. The term is INEC result viewing portal. So it was in the plan. It was in the plan by the electoral management body to allow Nigerians have a sense of what goes on at the polling unit, to allow Nigerians follow what goes on at the polling unit. And Nigerians commended the establishment of IReV because it allows even some political parties established situation rooms. As the results were coming in on the IReV portal, they were also collating their own results and also comparing it with what their polling agents were giving them, both at the level of the polling units and also at the level of the collation center. But in terms of the collation of results at the first level of collation, if you recall, Nigeria has 8,809 registration areas for electoral wards. That is the first level of collation. So what happens is that the moment elections are over at the level of the polling unit, the presiding officer, as it were, sorts out the votes, counts the votes, enters them into Form EC8A, stamps and signs, and then polling agents, if available, they will sign, and then copies will be given to them. Now, a copy of that particular result is scanned, is snapped, and uploaded into the IReV portal for public viewing to allow Nigerians an opportunity of knowing what is going on. Thereafter, the presiding officer carries the ballot papers, the ballot box, the BIVAS, as it were, and every other election material to the registration area and hands over everything to the collation officer for the registration area, who now collates the results. The collation officer does not collate the results based on what is in the IReV. The presiding officer collates the results based on the manually transmitted result, the manually handed over result to him. So that is the procedure, and that is what goes on at the level of the polling units and at the level of the collation centers.
All right, let's now talk about what the current reality is. There were pushbacks against the insistence that there is real-time transmission of the results in the Electoral Act. And, you know, the electoral reforms have kicked in. They have, yes, said there will be transmission, but not real-time. There's been the argument as to whether or not Nigeria is ready at this moment to handle real-time transmission, and if we have the facility for that. But I would like to get your insights on our readiness or lack thereof.
I think that in trying to understand this, we must separate or segregate two things. The first is the whole issue about real-time transmission of results. And the second one is about the preparedness or readiness of the electoral management body and Nigeria to transmit election results. Now, I think that there has been so much misinformation relating to what the law provides. Now, there's, because the narrative out there talks about real-time electronic transmission of results and leaves it there, which has created the impression that what is being provided, what Nigerians are fighting for, is real-time electronic transmission to the collation portal. But the law, as it was being written, relates to real-time electronic transmission of results to the IReV portal. And the Supreme Court has told us that the IReV portal is not a collation portal. So I thought that the debate will revolve around real-time electronic transmission of results to the collation portal, because it is only the results that go to the collation portal that will be used for purposes of collating results, making declaration, and making return. So these are two different things. Now, if you look at Section 60 of the current Electoral Act 2026, there are two layers that it has provided. The first layer it has provided talks about electronic transmission of results to the IReV portal, and that the moment elections are over at the level of the polling unit, that the presiding officer will sign and stamp. The polling agents will countersign if they are available, and then copies will be given to them. And then that copy will be uploaded into the IReV portal. Now, that is one. Then secondly, it also provides that in trying to upload that result to the IReV portal, if there's network challenge, that from EC8A, that is the primary result, will prevail if there's network challenge in that particular polling unit. As far as I'm concerned, that the proviso is a derogation. It has derogated from what he provided in section 60, subsection 3. But whether it derogates or not, the result that we are talking about in terms of from EC8A goes to the IReV portal for public viewing. It does not go to the collation process. I thought that people will be focusing on section 60, subsection 5, which mandates the presiding officer to transmit the results of the election at the polling unit to the collation portal. Now, it does not use the word electronically transmit. It uses the word electronically transmit in section 60, subsection 3, but in section 60, subsection 5, it does not use the word electronically transmit. So there are two levels of transmission. The transmission to the IReV portal as provided in section 60, subsection 3, and the transmission to the collation center as provided in section 60, subsection 5. Now, if you want to understand the import and the purport of section 60, subsection 5, you have to go to section 155, which is the interpretation section. The interpretation section defines transmit to mean to send, to transfer, electronically or manually. So, what section 60, subsection 5 has done is to give a discretion to the electoral management body to transfer that from EC8A, either electronically or manually, to the next level of collation. So that is the one that is important, not section 60, subsection 3, that deals with
IReV.
electronic transmission of results to the IReV portal.
Now, Mr. Okoye, quick one, just to clarify things, but we'll go on a quick break now, and when we return, I'll ask my question.
So, from what he's saying, section 60 subsection.
That's Breakfast Central. Thanks for staying with us. We're currently in conversation with Barrister Festus Okoye, former resident electoral commissioner at the Independent National Electoral Commission. Now, before we went to the break, you did well to break down the relevant sections in the Constitution that speaks about the mode of transmission. Now, you mentioned something particularly catchy and interesting. I would like us to beam our attention on it and also educate Nigerians further. You said the concern or the focus should have been on the collation portal rather than IReV. What reasons, what made you say that? And I also want to know if the collation portal is available for members of the public to view and how it works, the whole system.
Established by the Independent National Electoral Commission to enhance what I call transparency in the electoral process. So that is for public viewing. Now, the collation portal is where the results of elections go to. Now, it depends on the disposition of the electoral management body on whether it wants Nigerians to also view the results that goes on in the collation portal. As I pointed out, section 60, subsection 5 of the Electoral Act 2026 provides. Let me read it. It says, the presiding officer shall transmit the results, including total number of accredited voters, to the next level of collation. To the next level of collation. From the polling unit, the next level of collation is the registration area collation center. That is the first level of collation. So he's saying this transfer will take place to that next level of collation. It is that transfer that is used for purposes of declaration of results. The results that goes, the upload of from EC8A that goes to the IReV portal does not go to the collation center, and it is not used for purposes of collation of results. It's also used, it's only used for purposes of accountability. It's only used to allow Nigerians know what goes on at the level of the polling unit. But at the level of collation, at the level where results are tabulated, where results are declared, it does not go there. So my position is that, yes, electronic transmission of results we make for transparency. It will also give Nigerians a sense that we are transiting scientifically and technologically. But for me, what I would prefer is a duality in transmission of results. We have both the physically transmitted results in terms of from EC8A that is manually taken to the collation center, and then we should also have the electronically transmitted results that are transmitted directly from the polling unit to the collation center, so that at the end of the day, if there's a discrepancy, if there's a problem between the manually collated result and the electronically transmitted result, the electronically transmitted result will prevail or shall prevail. But as of today, that is not the case. The proviso to Section 60, subsection 3, which the lawmakers, in their wisdom, inserted into the Electoral Act, has derogated from making the electronically transmitted results as the primary source of collation. It has domiciled the primary source of collation of election results as from EC8A as manually transmitted or as manually carried and taken to the collation center.
All right, you've explained and you're advocating for the duality of these, that's the manual and the electronic transmission at the same time, and that where the manual fails or where there's any discrepancy, there'll be a heavy reliance on the electronic one. What would be your response to those who say, again, that we're not ready for that? You know, part of the argument was, again, the network challenges in some states within Nigeria. Do we have the facility to ensure this? Because that's the argument that those who have kicked against this have pushed for.
You know, I think that one of the biggest challenges we have in this country is that we don't pay attention to history. We don't pay attention to precedent, and we don't pay attention to what we've done before. If you recall, and I've said it, this debate, these arguments, these disputations took place in 2018, 2019, and 2021, and also before the general election. In 2018, the Electoral Management Body and the NCC established a joint committee to look into these issues. And if I recall, the NCC was led by a commissioner called Maska, while the INEC team was led by Dr. Mustafa Leki. At the end of the day, in 2018, they submitted a report and said that 93% of all the polling units of the Independent National Electoral Commission are covered by the major networks, and that the remaining 7%, the network operators who were part of this particular team agreed that they have the capacity to cover the remaining 7%. So, and this report was submitted in 2018. So from 2018 to now, unless you are telling me that there has been a regression rather than a progression, I believe that the debate relating to network coverage is really, really redundant. And if you also recall, in 2021, when this debate was also raging, the Independent National Electoral Commission produced what they call the position paper number 1 of 2021, where it made its position very clear on the whole issue about electronic transmission of results. And he said that the BIVAS, as we know it, has established what he called a technological convergence, that the BIVAS, as you have it, can be used for purposes of voter registration, and during voter registration, you call it the INEC voter enrollment device. It is the same device. During elections, you use it for purposes of voter authentication, and you call it the BIVAS. And then for result upload, you call it the IReV. So that particular gadget also has capacity to be used as a electronic voting machine if it is properly configured. So I think that this debate has taken place, and I don't think that there's any need for us to return to a debate that has taken place. And as far as I'm concerned, the debate is now redundant.
But Festus Okoye, if you say it's redundant, well, I think we'll be doing Nigerians a disfavor. Let me put it that way. But there's so many questions to ask, because you've raised a lot of dust right now. One, what we can rightly say is that the manual collation seems to be fixed, but the digital is not. So we've cleared that.
Yes.
And you're saying that the argument should have been that Nigerians should fight for both the manual and the digital, most importantly, so they would run concurrently. But I just want to move away from that conversation because you've highlighted that. You were part of the 2023 elections once again. And like I did say, you were a very strong bona fide member of the entire planning. I want to show a video to you, which happens to be the former INEC boss. And he made this statement, and then I would bring my question to you after we watch this footage.
With the pilot that we have conducted, and we're reasonably confident in the strength of the processes.
I mean, even in rural areas.
The machine on election day doesn't rely on the internet to accredit voters. It works offline. Now, when it comes to transmission of results, that's why you need network. But if there's no network in the immediate vicinity, the scanned image of the polling unit level results, which is taken using the BIVAS, will be transmitted as soon as the staff move from the polling units to the collation centers. And we have been working with the major telecom companies in Nigeria, and we are satisfied that the number of blind spots can be addressed in the country, and the number of blind spots where you have no network.
I mean, I can really say that that was your boss right there who was making clarification as regards the IReV. And you've mentioned that the IReV and the BIVAS is one in all. It's the same machine. During registration, BIVAS, during election, IReV. But during the debate, members in the parliament did say that, oh, network will not allow it to work, you're not certain. I want to ask a question. Do you think that the members of the assembly did not do their due diligence, probably inviting people like yourself and the Minister of Information and Digital Economy to brief them properly so they can do the right thing? Or do you see this as another failure as we walk up to 2027 in Nigeria's election?
Let me say this. Constitutionally and legally, the two chambers of the National Assembly have been given the constitutional right, constitutional virus to make laws. Those outside, you can only make recommendations, you can only make suggestions to them. But ultimately, the task of lawmaking is reserved for the two chambers of the National Assembly in terms of especially issues that are in the exclusive legislative list. My second point is that lawmaking in any part of the world has never been neutral. Sometimes individuals who are in parliament write their personal interests into laws. Sometimes they write group interests into laws. Sometimes they write into laws even the perspectives and interests of their own political parties, the interests of lobbyists and so on. So laws have never been neutral, and that is my second point. My third point is that the issue about network coverage, I'm saying that that debate had taken place before the making of the 2022 Electoral Act. During that particular period, all these individuals were invited to make their own positions known. And because the Electoral Management Body felt that it needed to also put out its own position from a non-partisan point of view, it produced its own position paper and domiciled it within the public domain. So I think that what took place in Parliament is just, for me, it's just politics that took place in Parliament. Most of the parliamentarians know that the Electoral Management Body had capacities he says he has. And that secondly, that the moment the from EC8A is uploaded into the BIVAS, that it locks it up there. And when it gets network, it transmits automatically. And as far as I'm concerned, there is no registration area in Nigeria that does not have network coverage. So if you step out from the polling unit and you go to the registration area, before you even arrive at the registration area, the locked up from EC8A will have encountered one of the major networks, and it will just transmit to the IReV directly. But my own concern is that what I want is that transmission to be to the collation system, so that it will become part of the collation process. But having said that, let me also say this, that when the result gets to the first level of collation, which is the registration area center, that the BIVAS, that gadget is handed over to the collation officer. And the collation officer has in front of him the manually collated result, which will be handed over to him by the presiding officer. He will also look at the BIVAS itself to look at the number of registered voters in that particular polling unit, the number of accredited voters in that particular unit, and the number of those who voted in that particular unit. And he will also look at the manually collated one and see whether they rhyme. So I think that the integrity and the professionalism of the collation officer is also key in some of these issues we are talking about.
All right. It's quite the conversation that we have. I think my final question, as much as you can in 30 seconds, there's still an advocating on the part of those who pushed back for electoral reforms. There's still an advocating for Nigerians to rise up and speak up and ensure that the necessary changes are reflected in the amendment, or that there is another amendment done before 2027 election. What would your response be to those who are calling for Nigerians to speak up for another amendment?
Prepare for the 2027 general election, that even with the 2022 Electoral Act, that if we act ethically, if we act professionally, if political parties believe in the rule of law, due process, and in democracy, we can use even the 2022 Electoral Act to conduct free, fair, and transparent election. Laws don't conduct elections. Human beings do conduct elections. So I think that if Nigerians believe in this democracy, if they believe in the electoral process, if they want the votes of the people to be the deciding factor in terms of who gets elected, we can get it right, even without any further amendment to the electoral legal framework.
And do you believe in this electoral process yourself?
I believe in democracy. I fought for democracy, and I will want democracy to survive in this country. But I believe that there are some individuals and some groups that don't believe in this particular process and are treating democracy with disdain. If democracy fails, all of us will be in trouble. And I say this because there are a lot of young people who have more or less disengaged from the electoral process and are looking towards some West African countries where we had unconstitutional, regimes. I want them to return back and let us fight to make sure that our democracy survives, because it is not easy to live in an unconstitutional government. We live through it and we suffer through it, and we don't want to go through it anymore.
These individuals that you speak up, and this will be my final question, these individuals that you speak up, did they in some measure play a part in 2023 elections and the criticism following? I know part of the questions that Nigerians are asking, we do have that, it's even on YouTube here. Nigerians are saying they're not quite sure what caused the glitch in the 2023 general elections.
Well, that whole issue was domiciled with the presidential election tribunal. The deputy director in charge of ICT in the Independent National Electoral Commission went before the tribunal and explained to Nigerians what really went wrong with the upload of the presidential election results. And I think that his explanation should be sufficient, especially for those of them who are versatile with ICT and technology.
All right, Barrister Festus Okoye, time will not allow us to ask so many questions. I hope when we extend our invitation to you again, you would be ready to speak with us, especially as we build up towards the primaries and the eventual elections, and not forgetting to your belief on the current INEC chairman, Professor Joash Amukpita. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for joining us live in our Abuja studios.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.